the 21st century, we don't tend to live in fear of the danger of nomadic invasion. But there was a time when for so many societies the cry, "the nomads are coming," was a permanent source of fear. In the great grasslands of Central Asia, there were many nomadic peoples that rose to create enormous civilizations. The Mongols, the Seljuks, the Huns, among others. The dangers of steppe invasion were a permanent source of anxiety. And this forms a crucial part of the history of this continent. Migration underpins so many aspects of the nomadic way of life. Moving from summer to winter grazing grounds, always making sure that your animals are fed. This is the key building blocks of the nomadic lifestyle, but it goes a lot further than that. Because your animals are not just food, they're also textiles. They provide bone and sinew and horn, materials that can be used to make instruments, weapons, and of course the tents you live in as you move from area to area. Mongolia at the time of Chinggis Khan was a mixed society. There were lots of nomadic peoples, but also in the thick forest belt to the north there were also many forest peoples who lived a very different way of life. But over time, Chinggis Khan welded them together into a great empire, and in that process, the Mongols acquired many practices, many customs, many traditions that were drawn from the agricultural peoples that they conquered. Picture the scene. As far as the eye can see, you can see rolling grasslands, and across those grasslands are thousands of wagons carrying the tents and goods of the Mongol civilization. You've got millions of animals that form the basis of the Mongol way of life. According to some visitors, they took several days to cross. But this enormous logistical operation, this fell in large part to the elite women of Mongol civilization. While the men were off fighting and hunting, it was the wives of the leading Mongols. They were the ones who made the Mongol civilization, the Mongol wagon cities, operate and function on a day-to-day basis. The nomadic peoples of Central Asia have often been described as invaders or warriors, and this is not surprising because often it was in those attacks or conquests that they made their mark on global history. But for centuries, many nomadic societies went from one area of grazing to another, leading fairly peaceful lives. But these are societies that raised their children from a very early age to ride, to shoot, to hunt. They need these skills for their daily life, but they all have military applications. The Mongol army was quite sophisticated in the way it was operated. It comprised of units of 10 soldiers, and then 10 of those units would make a company of 100. 10 companies would then make a regiment of 1,000, and then 10 of those a battle group of 10,000, known as a two-men. And this is one of the secrets of the Mongols' success. But as the Mongols conquered other groups and civilizations, often they would require defeated soldiers to be filtered into this system. And should you desert, then you would do so knowing that your entire unit of 10 would be executed because of what you've done. So basically you've got to fight, whether you like it or not. And so a dynamo develops, whereby the Mongols become more and more effective, and the fear this spreads means that many of their opposing armies are backing away from the confrontation before it's even started. Chinggis Khan had a very hard childhood. He and his family were repeatedly attacked, and at one point his wife was kidnapped. And these experiences seem to have shaped him as an individual, because always throughout his career he was continually seeking to expand, to conquer, to build his territories. Perhaps he was looking for that sense of security that he hadn't had as a child. Constantly expanding, constantly making alliances, and looking for new ways to build and make his empire more effective. The Mongol Empire and Chinggis Khan's campaigns were often very brutal, but they were successful. And success breeds momentum as more and more people come on board and side with the Mongols because they can see the way that the politics of the region are going. Also, many defeated societies were required to supply troops to the Mongol army. And so with every victory, the Mongol army became bigger and bigger, building a dynamo that would lead to the expansion and conquest of so much of Eurasia. On many occasions in the history of the Mongol Empire, the Mongol leaders gathered together for a great council or assembly, and these were known as Kurultai. But perhaps the most famous of these councils were those held to decide upon the succession. The great Khan has died, who is going to be the next leader? And some tents apparently could hold thousands of people. These are huge affairs. And the people taking part in them, having become fabulously rich as the Mongol Empire expands, reflecting the enormous purchasing power of the, by now, fabulously wealthy Mongol Empire. One of the most fascinating aspects of Mongol society is their desire to learn new ideas, new knowledge about strange places, new things that could make their empires more effective. So when the Mongols invaded China, they began to recruit Chinese siege engineers, addressing a deficiency in their warcraft. But later on, they also began to gather intellectuals, scientists, thinkers, doctors, people who could bring knowledge to their empire. And for example, in the Middle East, the Mongols created a research institute at a place called Moraga. And what they wanted was for these intellectuals to come up with new ways to foretell the future, extend the lives of the Mongol leaders, and bring them victory in battle or empower their empire. During the course of the 13th century, the Mongols conquered many different civilizations, from China to the Muslim world to parts of Eastern Europe, and in doing so they came to rule over many different cultures, religions, and as the years went by, the Mongol leaders in those different regions began to take on the aspect of those different cultures. The Mongol Empire in Persia begins to take on a very Persian aspect. The Mongols in China, their cities look much like the Chinese cities that they found when they first invaded. But of course, from the perspective of those who have been conquered, they're always Mongol invaders. This is a world that no longer exists. There are, of course, still nomadic communities that graze their animals from one area of pasture to another, but the great nomadic empires, these are now consigned to history. Or at least history for the present, I should say. But there's so much we can learn from them. These are different ways of organising human societies, different ways of thinking about the world, different ways of operating as individuals, as families, as groups. And so for anyone seeking to better understand the nature of the human experience and how it can vary, understanding nomadic cultures offers a great deal.